The online dialogue series of Refugee Poets was commissioned by the Special Initiative on Displacement SIF program of the Civil Peace Service of GIZ. We appreciate the discussions and insights shared. The opinions expressed in these dialogue series are those of the speakers. They do not necessarily reflect the opinions or views of GIZ.
Hi, and welcome. This is Try My Shoe. Try My Shoe is the name of a series of podcasts that is brought to you by Refugee Poet 2021 edition. Now, we are powered by GIZ CPS, a special initiative for displacement, and our other partner is Anika Initiative. Now, we have been going through conversations and topics on refugees. We have explored social political issues. We have explored mental health issues, and we still are delving into matters refugees. So why I do this is because I aim to put a face to the statistics. Refugee Poet aims to humanize the stories of the refugees. And that is why we are bringing this podcast to you. And that is why we are super excited that you choose to come on this journey with us. And welcome to episode 7. So today's conversation is in line with this month. So this is June, and it is Pride Month. And we have had a lot of conversations about love is love. But what about the minorities and then further still refugees? So we explore sexual identity, gender issues among the refugees. So this is very exciting for me because I get to unlearn so many things and I take you with me. And I have amazing guests as usual. And I would like them to introduce themselves. So I will start with the gentleman. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much.
Please introduce yourself. Tell us your name, what you're about, what you do. Karibu.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm by name Sulama Weje. I'm an LGBT refugee from Uganda. I stay in Nairobi, Kenya. I volunteer for an LGBT refugee community-based organization called the Nature Network. Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
We appreciate that you are here. You are amazing. Thank you.
Thank you too.
I will move on to you.
So my name is Maria Eva Ofona. I work at Highest Refugee Trust of Kenya. I am a protection officer and a focal point for the LGBTQ refugees. And thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you, Maria, for being here. Karibu.
Thank you. My name is Nafula Wafula. I am a gender and human rights activist, very passionate about gender equality and just reducing all forms of inequality in general. Currently, I wear many shoes, but I'm running my own organization called Ushindi Empowerment, where we walk alongside the grassroots or community-based organizations in order to help them achieve their impact within their communities. And our focus is largely on organizations working within gender justice and human rights.
Thank you. I am really looking forward to this conversation because I feel like we have this is like a pool with so many resources, and the three of you are very instrumental to this conversation. So I would like to get right into it. And so my first question is going to go to you, Nafula. what are the current gender dynamics within the minority group? And in this, I am speaking about within the refugee setup. So what are the gender issues within the refugee group?
I think, first of all, it's important to explore the gender dynamic context within the country, and then look at how it trickles down into the refugee communities, particularly when I'm speaking, it would be particularly among refugee communities that maybe now live within the country, within urban setups or
Urban refugees, yeah?
sort. Yeah.
Okay.
And it would be difficult to speak about this topic without looking at the context of COVID-19 and the dynamics that COVID-19 in itself has brought forward. So I think when you're talking about gender dynamics, you'll talk about the complexities that exist. For example, sexual and gender-based violence, which is always an issue of concern and which has skyrocketed, particularly during this COVID period. Economic inequalities, therefore, whether that's financial capability to be able to sustain themselves, whether it's women or just basically like the economic elements or the economic inequalities that exist. Access to healthcare is also a challenge. And just that is the cost of both the cost of healthcare, but also just access to quality healthcare in itself has been a challenge. When you're speaking about women and girls, there's sexual reproductive health and menstrual hygiene. There's been challenges in terms of access to menstrual products or menstrual hygiene products, access to pads. Very many women and girls have been unable to access. We've seen the rate of teenage pregnancy skyrocket as well, and the drop and very high dropout rates also of children from schools. Now, when you narrow down into the refugee community, then you see all these things mirror, but the challenge comes when you look at it within a community. You see, the difference is, for example, if you're speaking about a Kenyan context, this is home, and therefore, even as much as there's challenges in access and all these different things I've mentioned, there is still a layer of intersectionality when you're speaking about a refugee that makes it such that it would be even more difficult for them to access these basic things that I've been mentioning. Yeah. So if you're speaking about sexual minorities, for example, when you're speaking about homophobia, access to housing, or homophobic attacks, it's much easier, as much as it's not easy to seek for assistance or refuge, even as a Kenyan LGBTQ person, a Kenyan person that identifies as LGBTQ. There is another layer of complexity that is there when you're a refugee or you're undocumented. And so I feel like to be able to put this in a few words, now that I've said a lot, everything that I've said, when you look at all the different challenges that I've mentioned, now imagine having all those different challenges within a context where being able to access or being able to get assistance is much more difficult and much more context because of your status in the place where you're living. Where you're at already. It magnifies the issues. It makes them more complex, and it definitely gives us a reason to even have this conversation more in depth. I apologize for the many words. No. But I feel like it would be important to mention all those things, just to put some context for the rest of the panelists as well, even as we delve deeper into this topic.
Thank you. Thank you for the words. Please do not, and this goes to all of you, please do not apologize for you expressing yourself. I mean, this is why we have this podcast to fully express yourself. Now, Maria, Nafula has mentioned minorities facing, the issues of so the minority here would be a refugee. Accessing any of this, accessing health, accessing education, accessing security. And then further still, you are a member of the LGBTQ community, having all this access. You work at Highest, and so please talk to us about the access that you try provide to members of the LGBTQ community who are refugees.
Okay. So first of all, I'm very happy that Nafula has been able to expound very well the specific we call them now in the refugee space, the specific protection concerns that individuals who are persons with specific needs. First, that's what we call the refugees. And then the ones who come from they're sexually diverse and have different sexual orientations and gender identities. So that's where, as refugees, they have various reasons why they run and come into Kenya. And that's where now, in my context, in the urban space, that's where the urban organizations come in. So, for example, Highest, we do work within an urban refugee protection network. We have other partners in the urban area in Nairobi who offer different services for the refugee community, but specifically also for the LGBTQ individuals, LGBTQ refugee identifying individuals. And so as Highest specifically, we have various programs and we give them services through various departments. So we have the Gender and GBV department. And then we have the Legal Protection Department, MHPSS, which is Mental Health and Psychosocial Support Department, and the Economic Inclusion. So we have various projects and we program so that we are able to ensure that they have counseling. They're able to be given protection and assistance. Protection is very general, but in terms of protection, we mean we have them come in. They're done for something called an assessment. When the assessment is done, their vulnerabilities are... There's a criteria that we follow, and then we look at their specific vulnerabilities and how we're able to assist them. I'd like to shed light on the fact that in the humanitarian space, funding is usually an issue. So you're not able to assist every single refugee who lives in the urban area. But that's why we have a criteria, where we are able to get particular vulnerabilities, and based on that, we're able to offer, is it financial support? Is it counseling? Counseling usually is the biggest need that these refugees, especially the LGBTQ identifying refugees, face because of the discrimination and stigma that they have had in their countries of origin. And then when they come into the country of asylum, they face double or even triple that discrimination and stigma. Even within themselves, counseling also helps them for the individuals who have internalized homophobia. So how an individual who identifies as LGBTQ may see themselves based on the discrimination that they've seen other LGBTQ individuals face. So as Highest now, we try our very best to ensure that they have this protection. It's called first line protection, but I know there's an issue. There's a first line issue that usually comes in is documentation. The first line of protection for an asylum seeker is having the right documentation, and it's so sad that when an individual does not have the documents to be able to say I am seeking asylum in the country of asylum in Kenya, if you don't have documentation, then you fall through the cracks. So already we try our very best to ensure that our referral partnerships are very strong in terms of we work with the Refugee Affairs Secretariat, the government, and UNHCR to be able to ensure that these individuals, first of all, have the documents. Then with those documents, we're able to now start them into something called a case management process, where the case management process now takes them through opening up the case, following up on the protection concerns that are there. What services can we offer? If we don't have those services, what other partners are we reaching out to be able to offer these complementary services? So that's what we try and ensure, including capacity building. Why I talk about capacity building? Capacity building, especially in the LGBTQ docket, is very important because of the narrative. And of course, Kenya being a rather homophobic country, we ensure that we have capacity building for the government, for our own staff, just so that someone is able to have the right mentality when you're working with a client, because your own individual bias as a staff member may again harm
Yeah.
the individual who comes in to seek the support and the assistance. So we have capacity building for partners, we have capacity building for our own staff, then we have capacity building for the government as well, and any other service provider who may not be, for example, in the health sector, there are some health organizations that are not LGBTQ friendly, but we have others that are LGBTQ friendly. And so we ensure that trainings and capacity building on diversity, especially sexual diversity, sexual orientation and gender identity is very important. So it's the first step. You have to know who you're serving and know who you're dealing with first to be able to provide for them the right services.
Yeah.
So in that short brief, I'd like that's what we do as hires. Yes.
Those are the things you offer. Thank you so much. Those are services you offer. I mean, you have talked about facing discrimination from the country, refugees facing discrimination from the countries they came from, and then coming into a host country and facing more discrimination. So, Sula, talk to us about that, about discrimination in the home country versus discrimination in the host country. And now this is a third bit. Why did you even get a chance to choose a host country?
Okay.
And why did you choose this host country?
Host country.
Those are like 4 questions.
4 questions in one. Thank you so much. I'll try to answer them as possible. So usually when you don't get even to choose where you're going to flee to, but then Kenya being the closest country to Uganda, so for some reason it's where most of the LGBT refugees who faced persecution when the bill was passed, and also after the bill was nullified, was taken away. So many people fled and then came to Kenya.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
Please tell us what bill this is.
It was the homosexuality bill.
What did it mean? Like in a very
in a very bit. So someone was you were to be sentenced 7 to 14 years in jail. And then that is a bit that I could remember.
All right, no problem.
Yes. So back at home, there is a lot of discrimination in Uganda because I come from a Muslim and Catholic background. And then growing up, I used to find, comfort, in religion, because I used to go to both mosque and church. But then what really surprised me, because during the times when I was outed, the only place I thought was home or was a safe haven for me, that was the church. So also this same place, turning against me, because we are talking about culture and then religions, because that are the most effects when it comes to discrimination. Like people use a lot of that to discriminate people because of their sexuality. So when I came here, it was when you're hoping Kenya would be La La Land, but it's not La La Land if you've watched the movie. But then when you get here, it's it's still you have no family here. You're in a foreign land, and then getting access to basic needs like health facilities, because some of us really want to continue with work and then hustle around, but then we're limited in terms of getting documentation of employment and work permits, and then also the fact that Kenya itself, it's not it's not accepting with people who identify themselves from different sexuality, like gay, lesbian. So it's very very hard. People have been facing eviction from houses. People have been attacked, you've heard stories in Kakuma. Even in the urban setting, people have been attacked. And there is also the police itself. There is not the whole police, but then there is part of the police that still discriminate refugees, because they usually ask you why are you here? You say I'm from Uganda, but there is no one in Uganda. So there is a little, we need to do more sensitization when it comes to the police, these authorities, to get to let them know that people flee to other countries not just because of wars. There are other grounds where someone can seek refuge in another country. Yes.
So Sula, when you came into Kenya,
Yes.
As a refugee because of your sexual orientation,
Yes.
how did you go about applying for documentation? And probably you would tell us your experience.
Yes.
And then Maria, you could help ground that in terms of the policy framework around documentation for members for refugees who are refugees because of their orientation, because specifically their sexual orientation. I mean, the definition of a refugee says someone who's fleeing the country of origin because of persecution, because of either race, identity. Also, there are all these other provisions. Now, Sula, tell us what that was like, your documentation process, and just coming into a country that has homophobic laws and going there and writing sexual orientation. I fled my country. I mean, what was that like? I am just going wild in my head right now with the imagination, but please ground it for me.
Okay, so I came in 2016 in May, and during that time, the government, by then it wasn't the Refugee Affairs Secretariat. There was another agency that was, working on the refugees. By that time, they had seized, an operation that for registering refugees. So I remember reaching to the UN, that is in Westlands, their offices. They told me we are currently not registering, but you could come back in a month. I remember I've just fled home. I have nowhere to go. So I remember I camped outside UN for about a week. And then usually we were taken in for assessment, being told you will be taken to the camp. This is the only option we have right now. And then depending with my health condition, I couldn't go to the camp. I explained to the officers, and then I used to be brought back outside. And then after a week and a couple of days, I was then registered, given that documentation. And then usually when you're registered, they tell you how long it's going to take. Like, even if you go online, you read about the RSD, how you're going to be taken through the stages. And usually when you're saying it, you feel like it's going to take a snap of a finger, but then it takes time. So many factors chip in, like in terms of like they're not working on only refugees who are on grounds of sexual orientation, but they are working on so many other refugees. So and then with COVID, when it came in, and so many things like chip in. So I remember I did my first interview, which is called the RSD. The RSD interview, that was in a period of one year and a couple of months of waiting every time, postponing because of a lot of, they have a lot of refugees they're working on. And then usually when you're being, when you do these interviews, because by then because it was the government by then that was conducting these interviews, and then by then it didn't have like really good trained personnel that know about to handle someone who identify as gay or lesbian. So there was a challenge around it. But then I'm very glad the UN and its other agencies have really done a very good work, and there is a good sensitization when it comes to handling a person who identifies as gay or lesbian. So, and also, it takes, all I can say, it takes like a long period of time for someone to access, these kind of documents. And then it's all about, having hope and faith and patience. And also, as you're waiting on it, try to be, positive about it. Because however much, we want things to move fast, but then we have to also be realistic. There are so many things, so many people that are working on, and then, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for sharing your story. It speaks to the resilience, even, camping outside an office for a whole week. Thank you for sharing. Now, Maria.
Yes, I still remember the question. Yes, yeah.
Full circuit to you.
Yeah, I think you've asked me something to the effect of now being registered.
Yeah.
In a country that's ideally homophobic and being registered as a refugee. So, in specific, for someone to qualify as a refugee, you've mentioned a little bit where they're running away from the other country, from their country of origin to another country, and they're outside their country of origin, and they cannot be protected. They can no longer be protected in that country where they came from. And there are particular grounds at which individuals are not able to be protected. And usually they're called protection grounds, and there are 5 of them. There's race, religion, nationality, political opinion, and membership of a particular social group. So those are the grounds, and they're under the refugee. They're under the law, and ideally the persons of diverse sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity are protected, and their rights are enshrined in international instruments of protection. So for the LGBTQ identifying refugees, they are given protection under that membership of a particular social group. Okay. Yeah, so they're within that group. So just on the fact that these 5 grounds are ensure that an individual needs to be protected once they get into the inter-country of asylum, then it implies automatically that even individuals who identify within the LGBTQ spectrum are going to be protected. So yes, it was recognized even at the beginning when Sula mentioned that there was a DRA, Department of Refugee Affairs at the time. Then it was disbanded later. The systems were not, at the time, the systems were not working in terms of, as Sula's mentioned, capacity. Just capacity, not just capacity to be able to handle individuals who you're not used to handling, or individuals you don't want to hear about. Not just that, but also in terms of just systems of registering and ensuring that this process is actually moving. Individuals were coming in, a huge number of refugees generally were coming in, and the systems were longer and longer. Sula has mentioned RSD, it's called Refugee Status Determination. That's what each individual goes through. And at the time it was being done by when it was not, the systems were not working out with the DRA, UNHCR, the UN body took over for a very long while to be able to now fill in the gaps that the government was not able to provide at that time. And they were able now to give assistance and ensure that as an individual is coming into the country, they're still not discriminated against, because there are these grounds and they're very clear and they're under law, and you cannot discriminate based on those grounds. So there's what appears on the outside, and there's internally, yes, individuals are homophobic. Yes, it's a country that is a bit but at the same time, based on law and based on the rights, when you look at it from a human rights perspective, these individuals need protection, and they're not able to be given protection in the country where they have their country of origin. And so automatically they are now given the protection in that country that they have sought asylum. So that's how the LGBTQ individuals from the refugee community were able to
to get into that protection umbrella. Thank you for that. Yes. I mean, now the mental picture is clearer now. So thank you. Nafula, what do you think about the incorporation? I mean, Kenya as a society, how able are we to incorporate members of other nationalities? And then secondly, members of other genders. So how open are we to this as a community?
Yeah. I think identity is an interesting thing. It's an interesting topic, because the whole challenge with whether with acceptance and acknowledgement of others comes from a perspective where we hold on to our identity, and we struggle with accepting that there is diversity in identity. And therefore, what happens is at any given time, within our identities, if we feel like a person is alien to the identities that we know or we hold on to the most, or if we feel like a person threatens our identity, whether it's our identity within our religious selves or our cultural selves, then automatically we put up walls and we push away. And I think the most important thing, first of all, is to recognize that the issue with refugees, when we're speaking about refugees, when we're speaking about persons from other sexual orientations, the easiest way to be able to address it is to recognize that it is beyond your perception. It is simply an issue of fundamental rights. It's a rights issue, and everyone has rights. And that acknowledgement should come from that perspective. We really have no option when it comes to fundamental rights because they're based on the fact that we are all human. And when we approach it from that perspective, then our perception towards one thing or the other, whether that's refugees, whether that's persons of other sexual orientations, takes a back seat. And that should be the approach that we're thinking about when we're speaking about policies, when we're speaking about acceptance within the community, is acknowledging that these are fundamental human rights. And the same way I have certain rights as a Kenyan, a refugee person has rights, a person of a different sexual orientation has rights, and they need to be acknowledged, whether our perceptions whether our perceptions are biased or not. That's neither here or there. Then that needs to take a back seat. And so I think, first of all, where I come from, I currently live in towards the sides of Athi-River, Kitengela, and we have quite a large number of refugees, and we work with quite a number of them as well within our organization and in other spaces that I work in. We have some of them that we've employed. We have children, refugee children in the school that we run those sites. And I've seen more and more, there's much more acceptance, much more integration within the community there. Yeah. That said, there are still challenges as it pertains to whether or not they are fully accepted. And I look at the layers. So I can say, even for just like, if you're to look at the quote unquote, top, like a heterosexual male refugee would have a challenge, let's say with regards to like their job security or whether they'll get paid after they've done a job. I can only imagine what happens as you go deeper and deeper within the layers. A woman, a refugee identifying as LGBTQ, living in a community in Kitengela, within a kijiji, and then it's realized or recognized higher, he's from LGBT, identifies as gay. Yeah, so those challenges exist, but we're trying as much as we can to try and create perceptions where communities realize that at the end of the day, again, to think through that perspective of rights, but also to think of us as living, as one community. Yeah, so for me, I think with regard to this particular question that you've asked, having more conversations such as this that force us to check our biases, constantly force us to do that, and more conversations that help people understand what fundamental human rights are, and that build more community integration and more opportunities. Will get us to a point where acceptability for whatever social group it is that we're speaking with it about, like here, like a social group within a social group, or a minority within a minority, will be able to be acknowledged and recognized.
Thank you. So comprehensive. No. I have a random thought. Okay, so if is the I'm just trying to frame this properly, but is the idea of being able to say my sexual orientation is this, is that by itself a privilege? Why I ask this is, so for instance, Sula, you are one, and you are already a refugee. Number two, you then identify as other, So is it a privilege to be able to identify as other and proclaim it loudly, and be able to do it in a safe space? Is that already a privilege? And if someone is already a member of a minority group, is this a privilege that they have? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know it's a bit hard, but what do you think?
What do I think? Is it a privilege for someone, a member of the LGBT community, and then identify themselves, as
Yes, to be able to say, "Hi, I am gay. I am lesbian."
I know it comes with a lot of challenges because in this we are talking about discrimination, we're talking about stigma, and then because there is also so many things that factor in. For instance, we still have people within the community that are still, very discriminative, and then people have, internalized, homophobia. So, as someone getting to that point, I wouldn't say it's a privilege, but then there are people who are very, who feel privileged, getting to that validation, point and be like, yes, I am this. And then, to them that feels good. But then we still have, a lot of struggles because we feel like, a lot of people have been blackmailed, to not identify to who truly they are. And then just, try and go with the flow, you understand, and then try to be straight enough, or try be a man enough, or try to be woman enough, and what this according to what the societies expect you to be. So a lot of people I don't think they are very they feel more privileged, accepting themselves, and being like, yes, I'm this, and then accepting that, I'm a gay man, and that is okay. And then, it's a privilege, for some people, it comes with a lot of,
implications.
Yeah, implications. So someone to come out and be like, yes, I'm a gay man, it takes,
a lot.
Yes, it takes a lot. Because, you will be stoned, you will be, hijacked when you're walking. Someone beats you walking differently. Why are you, dressing a certain way? So, yeah, it comes.
So let me further explore that.
Yeah.
Why then would you choose to consciously put yourself in harm's way?
In harm's.
Yeah, but I mean, why would you choose to? The implications.
Yes.
But why would you still go ahead and choose to identify loudly, claim your identity loudly? Yeah.
Yeah. Coming from, I come from a family that, believes like men are supposed to be the strong ones. Men are not supposed to be cry. And then me growing up, I used to, because I was usually bullied at school, because I was very feminine. And then I used to have a bunch of girlfriends, and these, the people that I surround myself with. And then at a young age, I didn't know what that meant. I thought, I was just, way different from, the other kids. I used to be bullied at school, but then I remember I had, my mom was a very good support system back at home, because she was very close. And then my dad was more, we didn't have like an intimate relationship with him, because he was a polygamous man. So she had other wives. So usually it was me and my mom and my other half siblings. So, growing up, feeling differently, and then I got to understand probably I'm not how the other men are, other boys are. I'm just different, and then I came to love that about myself. And then however much there are all these repercussion that you're going to face, as you identify loudly who I am. But then at the end of the day, it's very peaceful, and then because. Being in a space that suffocates you and doesn't allow you to be the person you are. Because me, I won't identify myself, because I'm a person who is very flamboyant. I'm a person who loves to play with colors, and that's who I am. That is the man I am. And then being in a space that is going to make me very put me in a box. To me, that is not the man I am. So that is not who I really want, how I want to live my life. So yes, it comes with a lot of these challenges, but at the end of the day, I'm glad I'm not going down without a fight. You understand? I'm still going to represent who I am, and that I love the person I am. I don't have to be settled for. I'm not a basic person, so I love
I love that you're not a basic person.
Yeah, so I mean, they can be the best them, but me, I'm not, and I love that about myself. However much it comes with a lot of challenges. Yeah, but it's very beautiful and very. At the end of the day, I sleep and in bed, I'm like, yes. It's very peaceful.
I made the right choice.
Mm-hmm.
I am glad to hear that. I mean, yeah, that's quite something. So, Maria,
Yes.
how does Highest help make, and you in your role, in your very integral role, how do you help create a place where, say, Sula can feel free to be themselves? Mm-hmm. How do you go about that? He's coming with a lot of trauma, mm-hmm. and he's coming into a country where he's hoping to be able to sleep and to be able to celebrate himself. How do you then create this space for him?
Okay, I like that question. First of all,
wait, you didn't like the other question?
I liked more. So, first of all, I really enjoy the role of being able to work for and to, in a way, support the marginalized and we can say invisible, right? As Highest, first of all, Highest has been working with LGBTQ identifying individuals from 2009. So it's an organization that has been very integral when it comes to embracing individuals from the diverse sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity. And as a protection officer, first, if I'm to receive Sula at Highest, we ensure that we have the organization itself is set up in such a way that it's a safe space in itself. So there's the visibility in terms of having as a flag, the rainbow flag that may be in the reception office that makes an individual who comes in for assistance know that this is a place that it's
a safe space.
Yes, I can be able to come and get assistance. The next thing would be what I had mentioned earlier, capacity building. It's actually so important, and what Nafula had mentioned earlier in terms of conversations. When you have that conversation, then that topic, you're able to talk about this thing that you're so afraid of talking about, because without that conversation, then you're not able to challenge your individual bias. Mm-hmm. So I have to ensure, as a staff at Highest, I have to ensure that I don't have an individual bias that's stopping me from receiving this LGBTQ identifying individual. And part of challenging my own biases is there's a issue with reconciling individuals and staff members, in not just Highest, in many organizations, have an issue reconciling their personal and moral beliefs with the obligation of the organization. So usually it's very important for us as Highest, and usually that's what we do a lot, is we start the conversation from the point of you have to be able to reconcile, because you're choosing to enter an organization that supports these individuals, which means you have to make a decision. By the time you sign that contract, you've made a decision to support these individuals.
Yes.
As you're working with against your own biases, then you're able to support this individual. So that's how I receive Sula. I'm able to make sure that I have the right pronoun for Sula. I ask Sula, you'd like to be referred as they, them, or they, him. And then from that point, I now, in my documentation, I'm referring to Sula as, when I'm talking about pronoun, they, them. And I'm listening to what Sula is telling me. I'm listening to every protection concern. I'm ensuring that my body language does not communicate that I'm uncomfortable in that conversation. I'm ensuring that I get, because if I have an internal bias, my mind blocks off. This is just an example. If an individual has an internal bias, the mind blocks off from what the client is telling you. They're telling you that they have run away for this particular reason. You're not able to document because in your mind you're thinking about... This is very candid. Oh my God. And bedroom matters. How about bedroom matters? These are things that happen. But you want to avoid that so that you're able to get the exact needs. As a staff member at Highest, you want to provide the services before you start kuchambua vile mtu wako. You see what is the services. This individual needs counseling. I refer this individual to a counselor. This individual needs financial assistance. I refer to a social worker who does the assessment, who also is supposed to challenge their own biases, and then conduct the assessment very well, present the issue that this individual is coming to present, and then give the targeted services that individual is able to receive. So the point starts from challenging the biases, because if you as an individual, you're not ready to receive, or as an organization, because a staff member is part of the organization. So if each staff member is not able to receive that individual with neutrality, with intending to have dignity and respect for this individual, then they're not able to provide the services that they need this individual to get. So as Highest, we make sure that we try our very best to ensure that the space is very safe, and we keep saying it. This space is safe. You can say your issues. And I think Highest has come a long way in terms of working with the LGBTQ individuals. And it was actually the first organization that was able to document best practices for working with LGBTQ individuals in East Africa. And also the first organization that got funds from BPRM, that is the State Department of the US, to give support to specifically LGBTQ identifying refugees. So it's come such a long way. And then now with partnerships from the Kenyan national SOGI organizations, and who have already had movement building in the community with partnerships, we're able to support the LGBTQ refugees to plug in after we've given the services. As Highest, they're able to plug in when they go back into the community. They're able to plug into the safe spaces that have been created by the Kenyan LGBTQ individuals, so that it now prolongs the services they're able to get. Now they merge, they mix up, they talk about perceptions, challenges, what is going on, how do I, in my CBO, in my community-based organization, how do I get funding? How do I start doing the bid making? And how in entertainment, where do we go so we can be able to express ourselves and become more free? There are safe spaces also within the Kenyan SOGI organizations and the ones that they have created. And so we ensure that at least the refugees are able to be plugged in. So that in any case, when an organization later on is no longer there, you've created a very strong network within the community for sustainability and continuity. Yes, but to go back is just to ensure as an organization and Highest, we try our very best to ensure that we have those capacity building trainings for all, including police, which is usually sometimes very difficult, including police, including administration officials, and starting with documentation first, because most don't understand what documents these individuals are presenting, and then diversity. We are very diverse. Diversity is not just about sexual orientation. At first, diversity starts with you're very different people. You're very different, come from different cultures, come from different beliefs. But if we have this population that we are serving as Highest, we need to protect them, and we are obligated to protect them, because we work with UNHCR, and we need to follow the laws that all of us as agencies are espousing to. Yes, so the LGBTQ refugees, there was an evaluation that was done in 2019, November, for LGBTQ programming in Kenya. And amazingly, it's a very good thing, because it's something that you've worked on, and it has happened that the LGBTQ refugees were very comfortable to get services from Highest, because they feel that they're able to be received and given those services. Yes, as compared to maybe some other organizations, but not to say that other organizations are not supporting as well, but there's evidence in the work that you do. And when you've changed your attitude as a staff member, and we usually try our best as hires to ensure that our attitudes are very good when we're serving any, and not just LGBTQ individuals, but any individual within the person-specific needs group, but specifically for the LGBTQ individuals, that our attitudes match so they're able to give them the right and effective services that they need. Yes.
Thank you. Nafula, how do we debunk our biases? As the larger Kenyan community, how do we debunk this? I mean, people in the organizations in other organizations are challenging themselves to debunk this. So, where is Sister as our gender expert in this house? Tell us, how do we debunk this?
Yeah. Yo, that's a hard question.
But you've got this.
I think it's so first of all, Sula, thank you for the lesson on authenticity. It's like a masterclass for me. It's like few minutes. I'm over here living like I'm not a basic person.
Exactly. Remember.
Yeah. But that said, for me, the thing around checking biases for me began when I began to explore the topic of identity, and realizing that anytime my biases jumped out, that I consciously asked myself why. Yeah. And I realized, it comes from different places. More often than not, it comes from that space of identity. Yeah. And it's because this person threatens our idea that is tagged to like this core thing within ourselves. Yeah, my identity as a Christian. And then this person is coming, Sula is coming, all flamboyant, looking all dope, embracing himself for who he is and stating it. Yeah. And all of a sudden, and then all of a sudden, me and my conservative, let's say, whether it's religion or my deeply cultural identity, feel rocked to the core. And I feel like that is threatened. Like Sula is coming to take my space and to challenge this thing that I hold so dear. Therefore, I fight back. And at the core of it, as long as we recognize that that is where it is coming from, that it makes it easier for us to begin to challenge. Because then we realize it's not about fighting. It's really about having conversations. Yeah. It's about understanding what is it about me and my identity that threatens you so much, or that asks you so much. Where does it come from? And if it and then acknowledging, okay, fine. If this is the perception that you have, how do you make sure that it doesn't trickle down into a bias that eventually comes out as discrimination, whether it's in the words that you state or your actions? No one is telling you don't have a particular belief. It is your fundamental right to have one. It's my fundamental right as an individual to be who I am. And when we acknowledge that we don't really have to fight if we acknowledge those things, and we speak more about, again, identity politics. I think, man, we need to talk about that and have more conversations on those. That's going to be very key. That's from a community perspective. There's definitely the systemic change aspect, policies. When the people creating your policies are the same gender biased, sexist, homophobic individuals, it trickles down into the policies that will be created. And that's why that identity thing is so important in those conversations. But we also need to make sure that we as individuals, as civil society, as action-oriented humans, come out and state, and hold our governments accountable. And remember that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. If that injustice is there with regard to that particular group, trust you me, it will touch on you someday. Because guess what? You might not have a job, you might go to another country, be a migrant worker, and all of a sudden, all those basic discriminations that you are seeing in your country and not thinking they were relevant to you, you're facing them in that other area. Because it's easy, like this, to become to find yourself in a minority group. It's as simple as a conflict happening, or not just that. There's so many things, that would put us in positions of power. I mean, positions that are lower than we were in, And so we need to always acknowledge and recognize that. And yeah, let's be better humans.
Yeah,
Let's just be better humans. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Sula, you work at the grassroots level.
Yeah.
And your work is pretty much to sensitize and to open up, try carving up a niche for members of the LGBTQ community, and not just the members of the LGBTQ community, but you open this up more. So tell me how you do this with the already existing bias that we are aiming at, eroding, but they are currently there. Bias is currently there. So how do you go about this?
So first of all, the Nature Network, it's an LGBT refugee-led organization, but it's structured in a setting like it's in a family-based therapy model, in a sense that so many refugees, when they are fleeing their places, coming to Kenya, most of them, lose a sense of, belonging, a sense of, family. So when they come to, usually the beneficiary, usually like we do have a father figure within the organization, within the shelter, because we do have a shelter that gets to receive people, the beneficiaries. And then we do have a mother figure, we do have aunties, like in a sense that, at the end of the day, you've lost it all, but, you have a community that, loves you unconditionally and loves you regardless of how you identify yourself. And then, so how are we able to, thrive through all, this bias, discrimination. I think usually when we try so much to engage, to do a rapport with the community, because where we are, we usually do have community. We do community works with. We'll probably go and clean the area the neighborhood where we're staying. Usually we have, a good relationship with our chiefs and also with our neighbors in a way that, even if there is any security emergency, these are going to be the first respondent, So we try to be in harmony with everyone. However much we don't get to, tell them, we're LGBT, but then we tell them we're refugees, but then we try to, build that good relationship with them so that at the end of the day, we are seen, as, good people. Because usually when people hear you're a refugee, are like, why did you run from here? There are all those questions that everyone has in their mind. But we try so much, to bring people on board, the police itself, we try so much, build a good rapport with them. And also making sure like, we try to sensitize our own members and also the community members that security starts with you, and then the other thing we have to know, you're in a foreign country, and then how you have to be very respectable of their values and, their belief. However much, I'm a gay man, I know there is a limit, I can't, overstep, other people's, rights. However much I have rights, but then I can't overstep other people's rights. So we try so much, we tell people like, at the end of the day, you're first, before you want good security. Look into yourself, change your attitude. There are so many things, you can do to better yourself, and also, to make sure like you have that good relationship, regardless of the discrimination that is within the community. And also we do have livelihood programs that we try so much because we are usually buying from these community people, and then also they buy from us. So in that sense, we are already creating that good harmony with them, and also making ourselves very very valuable to the local host communities. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for painting that picture.
Yeah.
It is so much clearer when, this conversation has, to me, what it has done is it has given me such a clear mental picture, mental image of where we are at as a country and where I am at in my mind, and a call to challenge myself and my thinking, and a call to investigate what it is that icks me about this other person, what it is that makes me uncomfortable. And so I would want us to do a round of giving our final thoughts on this conversation. And probably, so come 2022, there's impending camp closure for refugees. And this will definitely have implications on the urban refugees as well. So your thoughts on what 2022 might look like and your closing remarks. Who wants to take it? It's up for grabs. Okay, Maria, sawa basi.
Nataka kunywa maji. Okay. So closing remark. I can say things.
I know, right?
Go say things.
So just in terms of for us as hires, because right now we try and focus on our mandate, as we are, even if we issue or give assistance to individuals within the urban space, we recognize that of course it's going to have some form of effects. But as at right now, we try and concentrate on what are the services we are still offering. So we try and ensure that we still have activities, but many of our activities have now gone virtual because of the COVID pandemic. But we still try and ensure that individuals in the community know, the ones especially in the urban area, that there's really, as per now, whatever protection concerns that are there, they're still coming in for case management to the remote or teleworking mode of work. We're still offering the case management that we need to offer. And in light of that, we try and encourage the community that for now, it's like, don't think about what's coming. We don't know. We have barely even finished 2021. So we don't know what will happen in 2022. We don't know what might change. Things might change. Things might not change. But you can only work with what you have. And another thing I think I wanted to mention earlier is also we try and encourage the LGBTQ refugees that, as Sula had mentioned, that protection and security starts with you. So to the best of your ability, you're trying to not create waves. And you're just ensuring that you have your documentation in place. As Sula has mentioned, you're trying to create harmony within the community space. And we also really appreciate, especially Sula and the CBOs that usually work in the refugee community, because they are most of them are self-led, they source for their own funding. But we as agencies make sure that we have given them support, because they need support, because they're now in this space and they need that support. And one thing that's also worked at hires to be able to create an environment of inclusivity is having staff members who are employed who are from the LGBTQ community. So, for example, we may have community workers who work directly, the link between the organization and the community, and who some may identify as LGBTQ individuals. And that has also been it has been a very good step, especially because now if you're able to ask this individual a question, and able to know firsthand what issues they're facing, and people in the community are able to get confidence that I have someone who's like me, who's working in the organization, which means not for favoritism, no, but it means that I'm able to be heard even more. It becomes more comforting for them to be heard. And we really, the main point of how we would like to move on is to continue having, especially conversations. We had a project under our pilot project, WRC, Women's Refugee Commission. We had a pilot project sometime last year. It was on solidarity and strengthening ties between the LGBTQ community from the Kenyan population and from the refugee population, including participatory sessions within the refugee community themselves. Because it's amazing that right now we are talking on a very general spectrum, but there are so many underlying. You see, Sula had mentioned earlier that within the LGBTQ community, there's the issues. And then generally, we also have LGBTQ individuals who are maybe persons living with disability. Yes. LGBTQ individuals who are survivors of gender-based violence. LGBTQ individuals who are maybe lesbian, bisexual identifying women, who are women at risk, single heads of household, who now have not just sexual orientation, not just refugees. Now they have It's like almost triple
Layers and
layers of protection concerns. Yeah. And so for us as HIAS, we really value dialogue, continuous dialogue. It's very hard, but we package the dialogue in terms of, especially when we come to discussing anything sexual and gender identity, we package it in terms of rights-based, first thing. And as Nafula had mentioned, it has to be rights-based first. By virtue of this individual being a human being, that's how they're supported. And then in case management, we have the survivor-centered approach. If an individual has come to you for a service, they are a survivor of something. And based on them being a survivor, there's a survivor-centered approach, which means survivor comes first. So what the survivor tells you, you focus on the services that this individual is supposed to receive. Why we like a packaging in terms of rights-based, because when you take this conversation to the community, we have even the community, general community. The general community may talk about, hatutaki hao watu wanatenda dhambi, many things. And then you have, when you're training them, you have to package information a certain way. When you're training the local administration officials, you package in a certain way. You start it very gently in terms of, as human beings, we have rights. Yes. Yeah. So we have these individuals, they have been there, LGBTQ individuals have been there in many communities, even before the tag was coined. Yeah. The LGBTQ individual tag was coined. Yes. So just in terms of that, we just ensure that we have that conversation. We have ensured that we have packaged information in terms of rights-based and survivor-centered, and we continue programming and seeking for funding to be able to support the LGBTQ individuals, whether targeted, but now that they're being mainstreamed, it means any program in any department needs to mainstream LGBTQ individuals within. So if it's trainings, if it's CBO trainings, etc., anything has to mainstream the LGBTQ individuals so that we are one community, we are survivors, and we are all being given the services we need to be given. So yes, thank you.
Thank you, Maria. You are such a delight. Yes, Nafula.
I don't know what really I can add to what she said. She's been very clear. Yeah. I think for me, my closing remarks are just around. It's just the same quote I'd mentioned before. It's the Martin Luther King quote on injustice. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And always remembering that at the end of the day, especially an issue around issues around refugees, because we don't run our countries, we honestly never know what might happen when and what situation we might find ourselves in. And I think it's just important for us to consciously, constantly remember that. Whether it is, God forbid, it comes out of a situation of conflict or otherwise, opinion, you might find yourself in that situation in a different country, and how would you like to be accepted, I think it's really, really important for us to constantly remember that. I think as a Pan-African person, I think the concept of borders always just irks me. It's borders in Africa as they are such a foreign concept. Foreign, colonial, not foreign, colonial, imposed. And therefore, when I sit here and Sula is saying, I'm coming, from Uganda and I have to come into Kenya, and then you have to do this to be able to get this sort of rights and acceptance. For me as an African, as a sister, in an African context, I'm just like, this is ridiculous, And so I think we also need to start thinking about this within a Pan-African context. How do we begin as African countries to look at this issue, even as we're doing the closure in 2022? How can we look at it within an African perspective?
Yeah.
And how can we create policies within an African context that, as opposed to approaching it with a very colonial lens, for these are now, we need to think about how do we now take them back to where they're coming. They're here. They're in Africa. Yeah. Kenya is really just Kenya because of a colonial
Our lives.
imposition. Otherwise, they'd be home here as well. But either way, we live in the times that we live in with the realities that we have. But I really just challenge us to begin to also think about this within a Pan-African context and what that really means. And how can we shape laws that would be able to look to incorporate Ubuntu, even as we talk about refugee rights.
Yeah. Thank you, Nafula. You've just said all my favorite words. Africa. They're all my favorite words. Hi.
Hi, so I get to wrap it up, right?
Yes, please. You get to wrap it up and your closing remarks and your thoughts on 2022. I mean...
I think what we're going to continue for the refugee community-based organization I work for. I think it's still, preach resilience amongst ourselves, and then continue to find means where we can be, self-sustainable, and regardless, whether the donors' funds run out, but we still have a community that is economically empowered, because our community really faces in terms of economic aspect, because there are so many people who are being evicted, so many people who don't have food at the end of the day. So we will try preach being resilient, and also being able to sensitize also the community, and bringing having this ugly conversation that people don't want to hear. Refugees are humans. Me identifying as a gay man, it's not a choice, you understand? So people should, stop using that word. It's not a choice someone to get, because you wouldn't choose for something that is ugly for you, understand? At the end of the day, you're going to be beaten. So, having this conversation will help us, have a better 2022, hopefully when we get there, inshallah. So, I think, basically, making preaching for the better health quality lives of living for LGBT refugees and refugees at large. Yes.
Thank you, Sula. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your truth. Thank you for teaching us a lesson on resilience. Thank you so much. You guys have been such amazing panelists, and I am glad I got to host you. And thank you for listening in. Thank you for viewing. Thank you for taking note and choosing to learn and unlearn with me. And I would invite you to join us on our socials. So let's continue these conversations on the Refi Poet pages and Anika pages. So the name is Refi Poet and Anika. Okay, Refi Poet is one platform. Anika is another platform. So please find us on these platforms. Let's engage. Let's have a conversation. Give us your thoughts on this. Let us have an opportunity to learn from you as you learn from us. And thank you so much to JZCPS again, Special Initiative on Displacement. Thank you so much for enabling, empowering this. So my panelists, thank you so much. And I have been your host. My name is Joy Chenyenyuzi, and I am always excited to take you through this journey. So I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. And remember to create a world where homes are not just defined by origins. Have a lovely one and take care of yourself. Bye.
The online dialogue series of RefuPoet was commissioned by the Special Initiative on Displacement SIF program of the Civil Peace Service of GIZ. We appreciate the discussions and insights shared. The opinions expressed in these dialogue series are those of the speakers. They do not necessarily reflect the opinions or views of GIZ.